everybody? This is Algebra 1 with Mr. Peters. I want to tell you guys thank you for the support, and I would like to ask you guys to like this video if you find it helpful. Today, we are going to be talking about solving multi-step equations, and I'm going to give you guys 3 very helpful tips to make this process even easier. So let's get started. So let's talk about these 3 tips that I have for you guys. All right. So tip number 1, when we see these multi-step equations, we need to distribute. All right. Distribute if needed. All right. After our first step, the second thing we want to do is then focus on combining our like terms. And the last and absolute final step is going to be solve for the variable. And I'm going to use these 3 tips to solve the problems for today's lesson. All right? So let's say we have the problem, let's just slide over some. 4m minus 5, and then in parentheses we have 3m plus 10. We'll close our parentheses and say that this is equal to 126. So the first thing, guys, we're going to go through our steps. Step number 1 asks us, do we need to distribute? And when I look at this problem, I have this -5, and I'm going to want to distribute it, meaning multiply it by 3m and then multiply it by 10. So once I do that first step of distribute, I should have 4m minus 15m minus 50. And all we did right there in that first step was multiply -5 by 3m to get -15m, and then we went back and multiplied -5 by -10 to get -50. All right? So we went through our first step, and now our second step asks us to combine like terms. So when I'm looking right here, I notice that 4m and -15m are like terms. So let's just step off to the side and add these real quick. So we have 4m plus -15m. So once we're adding these 2 like terms and their opposite signs, guys, we're just going to basically subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. So I'm going to have -11m minus 50 is equal to 126. So remember, at this step here, we're not done yet. I still have other like terms that I need to add, right? So -50 and 126. But the difference now is they're on opposite sides of the equal sign, so adding them is going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to do the opposite of -50, right? So I'm going to add 50 to itself. That cancels out, and I want to go on the opposite side and do the same exact thing. So now, right, we have -11m is equal to 176. So we went through the distributing part. We went through combining like terms. Now the last thing for us to do is to solve for the variable. So 11 times m is equal to 176. We're going to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. So we'll divide both sides by -11. And then as a final answer, we should have m is equal to -16. All right? So let's try this one more time and look at a different problem. So let's scroll on down. So problem number 2. Let's write it out first. All right. All right, so in our second problem, if you guys notice, we're probably going to we are going to distribute twice. So when I look at the first set of parentheses, I'm going to multiply -3 by k, And then I also want to multiply negative 3 by negative 8. And when I do that, I'm going to get negative 3k plus 24. So that's the first part of distributing. Now I want to go and do the same thing with this negative sign in front of k plus 5. And the funny thing with this part is there is no number in front of that parentheses. We just see a negative sign. So imagine that it's a negative 1. We're going to multiply negative 1 by k plus 5. And what that's going to do is change the signs of k and 5. They're both positive inside the parentheses, but once we multiply it by this negative, it's going to change the sign. So we're going to have minus k minus 5 is equal to 23. Okay? Now let's go on to our next step. We've already distributed, and the next thing that we need to do now is combine our like terms. So let's start off with our variable, right? We have negative 3k plus negative k. And if you remember from our adding and subtracting real numbers, if the signs are the same, you just add them and keep the sign. And I put 4. My God, I'm sorry. That's a k. So in this instance, guys, negative 3 plus negative 1 is going to give us negative 4k. And we're going to rewrite the rest of the problem to see if there are any other like terms for us to combine. And when I look at it, I see that I have positive 24 and negative 5. Right? So now we're going to have negative 4k plus 19 is equal to 23. Right? 24 minus 5, this gives us 19. Now, at this step, we still notice that there's like terms for us to add. We have 19 and we have 23. But how are we going to combine these two like terms? Yeah, so we're going to use those inverse operations, right, and work backwards. So positive 19, I'm going to subtract it, right, because that's the opposite of positive 19, negative 19. Subtract it from itself. I'll go on the opposite side of the equal sign and do the same thing with its like term. And now we have negative 4k is equal to 4, right? We distributed already. There's nothing else to distribute. We've added all our like terms. So now we could solve just like we did in the previous problem. So we're looking for a number that when we multiply it by negative 4 is going to give us a positive 4. So to figure that out, I'm going to divide by negative 4. And now we're saying that k is equal to 4 divided by negative 4. So we know that our answer is k is equal to negative 1. So thank you guys for joining us today. This is Algebra 1 with Mr. Peters. Join us next time.